So hopefully the video shows we're really looking to tackle some very real problems, some very ambitious problems, but we're coming at it from a very practical point of view. We're not here just with, a grand idea and we want to change the world. We actually have a bit of a plan, which hopefully sets us apart from a lot of the other ICOs and blockchain initiatives which are currently starting up at the moment. It's based around this idea of the internet of sovereignty, and it's a very common thing these days to hear the internet of this and the internet of that. And what we mean by the internet of sovereignty is the shift of control of personal power and action, the ability to make choices for yourself, taking that power back and returning it to the individual. The concept of nation states, which, as most people understand it, originates with the Treaty of Westphalia, and that was agreed amongst the powerful and the elite that we would decide what's yours and what's mine, and everybody that lived in my area I could control, everybody that lived in your area you could control. And those lines, which were meant to bring stability at the time, increasingly have actually become the cause of instability. You look at places like Sudan, you look at places like the Middle East, where they drew lines on a map and it ran through communities, it separated people, it made no sense. And the world has, been forced into this idea that we have to be content with a set of rules and a set of services provided to us by governments or governance providers or rulers based on geography. But we are living in a world that is transforming rapidly. We have much more international trade. Transport over long distances has gotten a lot cheaper, and now we have global communications, and more people are almost transcending a lifestyle that is geographically contingent to any one area and moving around. And borders are becoming less relevant to the individual, but increasingly, a form of a tool of the authority in order to actually maintain some sort of control in a world that seems to be sort of expanding faster than they can keep up. So we think these governance systems and governments aren't actually moving in the most efficient way forward by keeping up with technology, and they're clinging on to what power they can as much as they can, and trying to restrict that in order to maintain basically monopolies on the key governance services, which is everything from identity management to monetary systems, freedom of movement, access to opportunity. And we see this as a repressive system coming up against a very expansive concept of what life should be like today. The concept behind the Pangea jurisdiction, the internet of sovereignty, is this idea that instead of being given a government, or some people can choose their government, they can relocate, but that tends to be driven through wealth, really, and it's very inaccessible to the vast majority of the population. But we believe that everybody should have access to a choice of governance, or the ability to tailor the governance they receive, instead of this idea of one size fits all, and I can choose to either be a citizen of New Zealand or a citizen of South Africa, for example, and well, which one do I prefer on the balance of probabilities? What if I wanted some of the things that New Zealand provides, but I wanted to live in South Africa and get some of the more local services South Africa provides? But you know what, I'm going to start a business and I really like the way Singapore are doing international trade, so I want my business to have the benefits of some of the Singapore governance model. So that idea that you could mix and match and have multiple service providers and actually tailor a customized governance arrangement to suit your lifestyle is really kind of what we're hoping to achieve in the long term with Bitnation. It comes down to this idea of sovereignty and consent. At the moment, governments are more often than not, in fact, if you're lucky, your government is based on the idea of implicit consent. You vote for somebody, they tell you what they hope to achieve, you give them your vote, and for 5 years, barring the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, they have the power and authority on your behalf to do all sorts of things, including give themselves massive pay rises. But I've never heard a politician in the run-up to an election talk about the pay rises they're going to give themselves while they're in power. They promise you A, B, and C, but when they get in there, well, there's always D, E, F through Z to consider too. So that model of implicit consent, which is so easy to be abused, and as I said, that's if you're lucky. In a lot of countries, you don't have any kind of say in what the government is or what they do. But that moves to an explicit opt-in consent, this idea that if I come to you and say, I would like your authority, or I'm going to do something, and I want you to join with me, then you're joining me on that basis. If I change that basis, I either have to create a new community and you have to join that, or you can revoke your authority on the spot. You have the choice and the control at all times. And that's why we talk about the Internet of Sovereignty. This is this idea that the power through the blockchain always resides with the individual to opt in or out of a system, to create competition between governance providers, to have people competing for your vote, and when they let you down, you can move on. In the world of Pangea and Bitnation, what we would consider the government would just be a governance service provider. You could have multiple competing governance service providers. You could break them apart. You don't have to have one that provides all. Legal frameworks, how you, the rules of any given jurisdiction, the services on offer. These are things which at the moment a lot of them are provided by the state through taxation, and a lot of them relate to typically things like defense, security, healthcare, and those kind of things. And people, most people, shall we say, are very amenable to receiving those types of services. But you're right, we don't need a government to provide them all. What we need is service providers competing to provide us those services in a tailored fashion. And as I say, that's only the lucky people. There are plenty of people out there who are either stateless and refugees who have no legal protections, have access to no services, and in parts of the world are actively being persecuted. And that just really shows how ripe this setup is for change. Everybody complains about the government. Even in the most well-functioning economies and first world countries, for example, there's still room for improvement. Nobody likes the traffic department, no matter what country you're in. So whether you want to break off a piece of it and improve it as an individual element, or whether you as a collective want to get people together and say, here is a basket of services which we think works well, and people can subscribe to a single provider of multiple services. So it's completely tailorable, but at any one time they can change their mind. These are some of the prototype screens. It's an easy to use chat-based polylegal jurisdiction delivered through a smartphone app. Citizens are able to use the app for a few key functions, the three primary ones being to form communities or nations, to enact either P2P or collective smart contracts, and to be able to resolve disputes and manage the delivery of those contracts with services around arbitration. So in order to deliver this marketplace, there is an incentive mechanism through the PAT token to incentivize experts, whether that be in contract law or contract creation, arbitration services, or community building, to provide services which can be used either off the shelf or to offer services for customization. So behind the app, there is a thriving economy for legal services within a virtual, borderless, and entirely voluntary jurisdiction. The whole thing is packaged into a phone in order to make it accessible to the mainstream. At the moment, smart contracts require knowledge of coding or access to technical people who can build these things for you. But if we want to provide these services to everybody from a stateless refugee through to yourselves in this room, it has to be in an easily consumable form. And if you look at chat apps as a modality, they are growing, their importance is growing incredibly quickly. If you look at places like China and Brazil, things like WeChat and even WhatsApp are absolutely now, kind of the fastest growing tools for making agreements. And at the moment, those agreements may be restricted to informal agreements. Hey, what time are we going to meet? Let's meet there. Can you bring the following? In the same way, through Pangea, we can solemnize that interaction and turn it into a contract where, can you bring the following to this place for this price, and turn that kind of interaction, that very human and intuitive interaction, into a contract. And the technology that then underpins it all is our own mesh communication network, which is called Panthalassa. And Panthalassa was the ocean that surrounded the supercontinent of Pangea. Now, Panthalassa itself is not a blockchain. Panthalassa is, as I said, it's just a communications network, but it has the ability to write contracts to any integrated blockchain. So we're not then forcing people to use a particular currency. We're not forcing them to use a particular blockchain. There is, again, choice about what is the best, most effective form for the transaction. Is the benefit to keep transaction costs low, transaction times fast, or is it security, is it privacy? So those can be features of your contract, and you can choose the most appropriate blockchain in which to record these agreements. We believe that GovTech, governance technologies, will have the greatest long-term positive impact on the lives of billions of people than any of the other Web.3 solutions that are currently in development. Over 2 billion people around the world at the moment don't have access to the legal services industry, either because they're part of the System D informal economy, they are stateless or refugees, they live in predatory jurisdictions where their rights are not able to be enforced, or even if they live in some of the more advantaged jurisdictions, the costs of access to legal services is often prohibitive. So there is a huge market for this, and there is a desire almost universally to participate in a global economy if given the right tools. The ability to conduct business and live lives which are not constrained by borders or not subject to the whims of an authority. And the whole point is that if we can take all those services which are the preserve of the wealthy, the preserve of those at the top of the hierarchy, and make them accessible in an easy to use, AI supported, user-friendly application, we can really kind of open up the potential for young entrepreneurs, for cross-border transactions, and for people to actually have a measure of control and protection over their own livelihoods. The three main functions of Pangea are creating binding smart contracts via the decentralized app, resolving disputes through the market for arbitration services, and creating and joining virtual nations and communities. The contracting functionality on the platform is based very much on this idea of choice and customization, of not being too prescriptive, so allowing whatever works for the individuals involved, for both parties, to be permissible. So beyond just the terms of any contract, you need to provide this for that cost, or you contribute this and it's a shared risk of an insurance system. Behind that, the structure allows the integration automatically of code of law, the choice of arbitration systems, and enforcement. We allow even for legacy jurisdictions. So if you and I were to create a contract, we could choose that the laws of the Republic still apply. So we're trying to outcompete services by providing them more effectively. We're not saying that we're refusing, we're going to be separate from the current world. We're going to say, we want to provide other options. And if the current options work for you, great, carry on using them. Let's just make it easier and more efficient to do contracting. Get access to legal services. But then at the same time, we can start to introduce additional layers, additional options which you don't have today in the current government system, where I can create a bespoke code of law. I can use third-party distributed applications. And there are even startups looking at in security and enforcement, and using code itself as a means of enforcement. So we're adding on that custom designed layer, and then over and above that, a community layer, the marketplace. I may not know how to code an entire legal system for a particular contract, but there are lawyers who do, and they can use their expertise, and they can provide templates, and they can advise, and through a reputational system, I, as a consumer of these services, can go onto the platform and choose something that I can see has a good reputation, that seems to work for the particular circumstances that I'm interested in, and I can literally choose it off the shelf. So it is about, again, about choice, about experts. It's about bringing together a market economy for those legal services. And our aim, as you can see at the bottom, unless I want something very custom and very bespoke, is to bring that idea of creating a contract, a solemn binding legal contract that has a dispute resolution mechanism and an enforcement mechanism down to a couple of dollars, and can be done at the click of a couple of buttons. These are the kind of buttons that we're talking about. You can find counterparties, service providers, generate the smart contract using an AI-supported chat function, select alongside the contract terms, as I said, the code of law, the arbitrators. You can get witnesses. The contract is signed, notarized to the blockchain of your choice. That would then trigger also ancillary services, which can also be provided virtually. Escrow services and dispute resolution if necessary. So this then is what it looks like from an architectural point of view. The whole thing is based on the mesh network at the bottom. Bitnation itself then provides the infrastructure and applications. As you can see there, the various functions which allow for the user to have the tools to then, at the next level, create contracts with the choice of customization that we've discussed. Those contracts then execute to the Ethereum blockchain, and then that gives rise through an API or the marketplace to a wide range of potential uses that third parties can introduce. And that can be done in a borderless, non-geographic way. An insurance provider can provide a specialist insurance product to rice farmers. And instead of just having the rice farmers in their territory or even their country, those rice farmers could collectively share the risk with rice farmers all over the world. There doesn't need to be this idea that these pools are limited. If you have a particular health condition that you're looking to pool resources and get insurance for, if you're in a niche pool, that becomes prohibitively expensive. But even though it's niche, if you can increase the size of that pool, costs tend to come down. Access by service providers to treat you, instead of having to have a treatment center in every geography, it may be actually more cost effective to have one or two very highly specialist treatment centers, and through a much larger cost sharing initiative, it may be more cost effective. You know, the cost of seeing some of the real top specialists in some very niche medical conditions, the cost of flying somebody, if they're able to travel, of course, but the cost of transporting somebody to that specialist is probably a lot less than having to set up a treatment center in all the different separate geographies just because they have different rules. As I said at the beginning, we're actually focused on delivering something here. We have a team that's currently building. We've been founded for about 4 years, and we're not just a new blockchain startup with a white paper. We've done a lot already. In 2014, we lay claim to the fact that we had the first marriage registered on the blockchain, as well as world citizenships and some other pilot projects. In 2015, we used the Horizon chain to register land titles and birth certificates. In 2015, we also did the emergency refugee ID system, where we actually were able to create a system to help, you know, people who were basically facing a personal crisis, personal emergency, and actually provide a real genuine benefit to an individual that didn't require them to have access to even to technical skills. We were able to harness the blockchain for somebody without any skills whatsoever in that space. Our MVP, our minimum viable product that we use to prove that the legal systems and the legal services that we're talking about can be replicated, those services can be delivered on the blockchain, was when we created a public notary system with the Estonian e-residency program. I don't know, anyone familiar with that? So, yeah. So Estonia doesn't require you to ever go to Estonia to become an Estonian citizen. You can be an Estonian citizen from anywhere in the world. You can have access to whatever services that they're able to provide you remotely by voluntarily choosing to become an Estonian. And using technology, their e-residency program allows people to start up and register businesses in Estonia from anywhere in the world. And partnering with them, we developed a public notary that was actually used to notarize contracts. So we proved that there is appetite for this and that we could deliver product. At this point, we started developing the early version of Pangea, this idea of DBVNs, the decentralized borderless virtual nations. We started on the Ethereum blockchain. As I said, you will be able to write to any integrated blockchain. We've started with Ethereum, and we will add the others. Not all of the others, but others. And that is where the current product started being built, and we've been building it solidly since then. We designed the PAT tokens, we've integrated with the interplanetary file storage system, and the refugee system that I mentioned earlier, that won us the UNESCO Nextplo Grand Prix Award. So we're very proud of that. And that brings us to where we are now at the end of last year. We released Pangea version 0.03. We're building the front end, LucyBot, which is our AI, the Oracle, and we're having the token sale event by the end of this quarter. To prove that, you know, we're not a vaporware, anybody with an Android phone, you can go to the Play Store and you will see the alpha version. It's fairly limited today, but we're hoping by Saturday to have the next version released after the next sprint cycle. And by the time we get to the start of the token sale, which is on the 25th of March, to have the version after that in stores as well, and hopefully in the iOS store as well. So these are still alpha versions, but we're building, we're delivering. We have a team now of, I think about 15 developers, technical staff, architects, focused on the back-end technology, the front-end technology, the AI. We're actually in production. So what have we achieved? I mean, this is now a bit out of date because we've got way more than 10,000 citizens now. The combined contribution over all these years of over 2,000 different contributors. If you go look on our GitHub, we've got 100,000 plus lines of code. It's all open source. We have representation around the world in over 200 countries now. And as I say, our product is out there and working, and we're notarizing contracts. Our development roadmap, for those of you who are technologically minded, this is where we were at the end of last year, where we produced the alpha, as I said, got a lot of the back-end technologies with the communications network, IPFS, basic front end, the integrations with Ethereum, and we're ready the mechanisms for the PAT token. What we're working on now is some of the more advanced functionality around the AI, and this idea of being able to have a chat based modality for the contract creation supported by an AI system. So the AI would really understand and pass the context of what you're trying to agree with the third party, which overcomes the need for technical knowledge, as well as also hoping to overcome a lot of language barriers or even syntax barriers. So for example, if I wanted somebody to come and paint the doors on the outside doors on my house, you know, I could start a chat with somebody who is offering those services, and we could agree that, you know, what price would you charge to paint the doors? The painting of the doors would be a clause. The price would be recognized by the AI and inserted into the contract as the contract price. I could say, yes, I agree the price. When is it going to happen? A date would be agreed, that would be recognizable, as well as the location, and that could be monitored through integration with even something like Google Maps. So now I've got a contract which specifies a deliverable, a price, a date of which the delivery is required, and even a geolocation which is the provider is required to check into, you know, within certain parameters. Once that is all agreed, we'll say the neighbor next door can act as the witness, and, you know, because I'm going to be out that day, so we agree that a third party will do the validation of the results, and, you know, either party can provide photographic evidence to the contract, and I will upload the money now into an escrow, and if all of the terms of that contract are satisfied, the money will be released. But that's what would happen behind the scenes. I would just ask you to paint the doors, you'd tell me the price, I'd say to you, great, can you come on this day at this place, and the neighbor will check that the work is done properly. So that's what we're working on at the moment, to get the alpha really to the point where, you know, the service is fully usable and functional. We would then move on to the public beta stage, where we would start to bring users onto the system. And this is where the idea of the PAT token and the user rewards come in. Now, in the token sale, we will be selling 1/3 of the tokens in order to raise the funds to do the development on an ongoing basis, and also to fund community development, innovation projects. But the incentive for users of the platform is that the AI algorithmically provides PAT tokens as a reward to core contributors. That idea that you saw in the video about reputation, in that you can't buy or sell a reputation. We have a set of 3 different reputation tokens which are awarded, a bit like an eBay style reputation. slightly more sophisticated with the multiple variables, but that idea that when you come onto the platform, you can see the credibility of either the people you're interacting with or the contract that you're choosing, the services, the arbitration service that you've selected, and you can shop around on that basis. And people that active and ethical on the platform, they're using the platform for creating communities, they're providing expertise and services in the marketplace, they are rewarded as well with the PAT tokens. And the PAT tokens are tradable. So while the reputation tokens aren't tradable, your reputation is fixed and transparent, you will be rewarded for contributing, for using the system, and for accumulating a good reputation. So through a sort of gamification process that we've worked on, we are very much incentivizing ethics, good behavior, and contribution. When the product is ready to be used, our goal is to grow the user base to 150,000 citizens within 12 to 18 months, targeting particularly young, technology-savvy individuals in the global markets. Down in the bottom corner, the sort of mix of BRIC countries and mint countries. South Africa could easily fit on that list. In terms of what we're trying to achieve, the potential number of total users, I think to try and add 50,000 citizens through high-profile pilots and innovation funding, 60,000 through partnerships with larger organizations, and 40,000 citizens just through direct community engagement. When you consider we're already halfway at that target, I think that's a very modest number, and that actually the potential is a lot bigger than that. The total token sale looks to raise $30 million US. We secured 3 million in our pre-sale, which was at the end of last year, and we are now in the process of preparing the contracts and the wallets and the security for the crowd sale, which will happen, as I say, later in March. In order to incentivize contributors, the PAT tokens themselves will be registered and traded on exchanges as you would a lot of the more common cryptocurrencies. This is not a diagram we did, but it's one that we very much like, that shows how the decentralized world of tomorrow, as they call it, as it matures, the value it can provide increases dramatically, starting from the basic protocols and infrastructure through to the middleware, liquidity and capital to make sure that transactions remain fluid, and of course coming now to the last stage, and it has been remarked on by Vitalik as well, that this community now needs to stop just talking about the potential value and actually delivering value. But don't just take my word for it. You want to find out more about Bitnation, we've been covered extensively, so we're not just kidding. We're dealing with some big issues, some serious topics with a lot of potential. So, we've had the tires kicked significantly. I mentioned that we won the UNESCO Nextplo Grand Prix last year. And so just to sort of end off and point out that previous winners include Twitter, Shazam, Slack, Spotify, and Siri. So we think we're in pretty good company, and we're very enthusiastic to show that we have just as much potential moving into this future space as those organizations did when the internet and those distributed services were coming into their prime. So thank you very much, and I'd love to hear your questions.